Well, one thing I do remember, I must have been very small. I went with older people to church Sunday school, and we used to have a stamp book. If you attended, had a stamp to stick with a religious picture on it. And I came home and I found I didn't have my book. I'd lost it, and I was in tears. And my mother and father took me, and we stood at the end of the bank because, of course, quite a few went to church, and waited till the older people came along, and one person had picked it up and was able to give it back to me. I was born down the road at Woodville, was the name of the house. It was next door to the shop then. When my father and mother got married, they lived in Woodville, which they were tenants. And then, I was about 12 months old. A lot of the property, this particular property, belonged to Stackpool Estate. And they were selling off part of it. Of course, they wanted to get some more money to carry on. And it was my mother who said to my father, we'll never be able to buy this house, because she knew they would keep it as their own. So he went to the auction and he bid for this one and the adjoining one. And then one of his brothers lived in that one most of my childhood. My mother was born in Houghton. Her father was the village blacksmith. The family came from mid-Pembrokeshire, and I'm a bit doubtful. I think perhaps he could have had connections with Williamson, because Sir Owen Scofield had a country house in mid-Pembrokeshire in the old days. And from my records, he started training as a carpenter, and then he went off to Swansea to train as a blacksmith, probably because they needed a blacksmith in the village. Well, my mother, of course, she was born there, and she became a teacher. She had to study. She was a pupil teacher for either 5 or 7 years, and of course she started by just running around and doing odd jobs, and then she applied and she went to Langham, and she taught in Langham till she married. She married about when she was 30. My father was in the dockyard. He started off on what they called a surveying boat, which took him round part of the country, coast surveying. I know he went to Jersey and he went to Blackpool and somewhere up near the Lake District. And then he got a job in the dockyard, which was better for him. And of course, electricity was pretty new then. They didn't consider them as apprentices or anything. But they were all learning as they worked, really. I went to Houghton to the school. We walked. But the first year, I was always small, and the aunt in the photographs was still there with my gran. And so on Monday mornings, I used to go off with all the other children up to school, call to my grans on the way and leave a little basket with a lid on with my clean nightie in, and then go down to school then. And then I stayed in Houghton till Friday with my aunt, and then took the basket home with.
You walked though?
Oh, walked. There was no other way.
And how far is that?
1.75 miles. And nobody said, poor little soul, you got short legs. We all did it, you see.
What about when you went to grammar school, when you went to secondary school?
The first year I used to go around, across the ferry, Barn Lake to Nayland, and then go down and cross with the steamer, because the older girl who was caring for me was scared of the water. Well, she left at the end of the first year, and I came back and went across the ferry then.
Every day?
Every day. The boys, it ended up 6 boys and 2 girls across the ferry.
What was that like? It wasn't a motor ferry, was
No, it was probably about 2 foot longer than that one up there, and it was a sail, and it was all right. And it was interesting because, of course, it was 1926, the Depression, and the dockyard closed in 1926, you see. So there were a lot of people around here. My father became unemployed and others, and they had to go over to Pembroke Dock. I think it was twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays, to sign on the dole. And they got, my father, I know, for a family with 2 children, he got 29 shillings a week. And he could go in his own boat, which didn't cost him anything, but these others along, I know it was only a few pence, 6pence, but that's out of 29 shillings they'd have to pay to go. They had to sign on, and on Fridays they got their money.
There was a lot of transport. I mean, the ferry boats were used a lot, weren't they?
Yes. Well, the steamer had a proper timetable. It went about every half hour. All day.
And where did that go from?
From Nayland to Hobbs Point. And our ferry, the boatman lived in the pub over there, and if the boat wasn't coming, you went down, you waved your hand or a hanky and he came over. Or living where we do, we'd watch the window and we'd time it when we saw the boat coming over. We'd time it that we went down and got in the boat when it came across.
Who ran the boat?
The people of the ferry, of the public house over there, that goes with the ferry. I was told that if anyone asks to cross the ferry, they're supposed to transport them.
So it was part of the job, really?
Part of the job, yes.
One of the ferries was run by 2 brothers, wasn't it? Was it the Griffiths or...?
No, Mrs. Pugh was there. Oh. Mrs. Pugh had her husband. She and her husband ran, but he drowned. He liked his liquor, but he was out one night in the rough and fell out of the boat and drowned. But Nayland, Hitchins was the name. That could who had the steamer.
Tell me about the Barn Lake ferry.
Well, that was the little ferry. It's now the marina there. And there was an ice factory on this side of it where the trawlers came up from Milford to get their ice to go out to sea. And these 2 brothers ran the ferry. And they'd been in school with my mother when she was a friend, because we children used to go to music lessons on a Saturday morning, and of course we were always told to be polite, and we used to speak to Mr. Griffiths. We used to go on. He was quiet and nothing wrong with his behaviour, but he was dirty, you know, and Mr. Griffiths. But what tickled us, sometimes when only we 2 were in the boat, he'd say, "How's your mother?" And this tickled us pink. We couldn't get home quick enough to have a laugh and tell my mother that this man had asked how she was, because they'd all been kids in school together. And they didn't go home. I understood that they had a sister who was normal, you know, she had a tidy house, etc. But there was a bridge over the railway to get to the thing. And they would dust down somewhere there. I know we've come back quite late because we have relatives in Nayland, and they've emerged from some corner and taken us across in the boat.
Mm. You, like your mum, you became a teacher. Tell me about how you reached that decision and what happened.
Well, I don't know. I think I knew when I was quite small, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a teacher. I think I knew that. And I can remember it wasn't a proper blackboard, and I used to like to do things on the blackboard. And my sister didn't like it. She'd run off and play with somebody else. But I just decided, and I've said that when I retired, I said I'd be daft enough to do it again.
You went to college?
Yes, in Swansea.
Was that difficult? a young girl of in those days going away to college?
Well, I didn't think it. I mean, I just... People ask me that. When I got my result, I thought I'd like to go to college and do it properly. And when I got my GCSE results, they were quite good. Well, my father was by then working in Chatham Dockyard.
In Kent?
Yes, and he only came home when we only had 1 week a year, see, Christmas Day and Easter Day. Christmas Day and Good Friday were the only holidays. And this roof is all this solid. I was upstairs, I never let on I knew, and Dad had come home and he said, Grace has done quite well in her exams. And my mother says, yes. She says she'd like to go to college. So there was a long silence. And then Dad said, well, if it's because she wants to go, she'll probably work, you see. So they decided. So I applied and I got in.
When you finished college, what happened then?
No, there was hardly any work anywhere. You couldn't get a job. And in any case, you had to wait till October the 1st for the results of your exams in those days. And I applied for just over 100 jobs before I got one. Because there were so many teachers. Some of the people who came out with me never taught because they couldn't get jobs. And then I went to this Somerset Village for interview, and that was it was a bit upsetting because it was a girl who'd been in college with me who was the other one in the thing, and I felt a bit awkward about getting the job, and she didn't, you know.
But you had to go a long way, Somerset.
Yes, I was there 8 years. I was very happy there in the village. I've still, the son of my friends died of motor neuron a month ago. So I've got nobody there now. But the other son, he's in the Midlands teaching, and he comes to see me. I'm still in touch with him. And, I would belong to a village, so it was village life. And their dialect, my sister was with me once when we went back on a holiday, and some friends I knew with, they were all talking, and I was joining in the thing. And the next day when I went off with my sister, she said, what were you all talking about last night? Because the dialect was so strong. Of course, now with television, we're all losing it, aren't we?
You were there 8 years, then what?
Then I applied for other jobs. I decided I could have stayed and been I was appointed the head. And then the war came. They were going to change all the arrangements for education, you see, but that was put on hold. And I didn't like the arrangement in the school. Then the first head had gone, and I thought, well, I'm not going to spend my life here being, unhappy in a way about my work. So I applied and eventually got a job in Cheshunt.
In Hertfordshire?
And that was in a very old school, and they'd been fighting for years to get a new school. And then, of course, the war stopped that. Then after the war, his parents went on strike and went up to see Ellen Wilkinson. And finally, we got the first new building in Britain after the war, all glass.
You were quite close to London then, of course.
Yes.
North of London.
Yes. So
what did you do then? If you went up to London, what did you do there?
Oh, we went to the theatre. We could go to matinees. We'd go in the evening. There came a time when we'd seen every show that was on in the theatre in London.
Well, you were a long way from home.
Yes. But that was it. And my parents, we didn't have any of this weeping. My mother, she's very practical, because Dad wasn't here when I went off. But if I wanted a job, I had to go and get it, My mother, she'd say, we'll miss you. And I know she did. But you had to do it. Now I notice with all these things, all these people have been to college, they all come back to Mum.
How often did you, when you were in Hertfordshire, how often could you come home?
I used to come home the summer holidays. No, then I used to have a fortnight off. I used to go somewhere else with friends for a start, and then come home. Easter and Christmas.
Let's go back to Langham when you were a young, or this area when you were a young girl. Langham women have got quite a reputation.
Yes.
Tell me all about them.
Well, they were fishermen. I don't know if I've still got the photo. I must look see if I've got a photograph of my grandmother. They sold fish. It started before Milford Docks, in that the men went fishing in the river. And my dad's told me how he, as a young child, would go all night up, as I told you, towards Picton fishing. And the women went and sold the fish. Sometimes they went into Haverfordwest, but they also went to Pembroke Dock and even to Penally and Tenby, because Frith has a photograph of the Langham women. And they had these panniers which they carried on their back, and they had an ordinary basket, big basket, in which they had pickled mussels and cockles, which they picked off the beaches and sold at the doors. And they would come in donkey carts down here near the Jolly Sailor. There was a wide space outside the hedge, which has all disappeared now, where they would leave their donkey cart for the day. They did it, I think it was Tuesdays and Fridays. And there were generally two in, one who owned the trap and the other came as well. They each had their own fish, and they crossed the ferry boat with us. I've crossed every Tuesday and Friday. We were full up. The gunwale was about that much above the water. And then they would go to, most women went round the town selling fish. But there was another one, Mrs. Bessie Thomas, I don't know if you've heard of her. She was a character, but she had the contract for the barracks, which were up the top there. And all she had to do, she had a bigger pannier than ever anybody else's, much more full, because of course she knew she could get rid of all this fish. And she used to go first to the officers' mess, where they bought what they wanted, and then she'd go to the sergeants' mess and they bought what they wanted, and then she went and got rid of all the rest in the ordinary canteen. And then she would wait all day. They'd entertain her in the sergeant's mess. She'd probably entertain them too. And then wait till the rest of the women came, and then come back and go home in the donkey carts. And they wore, I think long ago they had a red petticoat. There was Mrs. Dolly Palmer, I do just remember her. But it was generally either a black or a navy, very full and warm skirt that went down nearly to their ankles, and a warm blouse with long sleeves, and an ordinary shawl, which was folded so that it was triangular, and put over there. And then, of course, an ordinary felt hat. And that was their outfit. When I retired, I came back here. Well, it poured with rain because I didn't take. I had a house of my own by that time, and I'd got rid of a lot of furniture, but things had to come home. And of course, I stayed a night with friends, and the van had gone on the day before. It poured with rain. And I had neighbours who saw the furniture in. Apparently it was terrible getting them in. The lorry couldn't come up here. There was a building, a garage down there, which was in the way. And they had to carry it all up. So I got home, and my sister, she used to panic a bit. She was in a state about all this. But we sorted it out. You know, I know I had a time trying to put in all the china that I brought home, crockery, and find places in the house here for it, you know.
What was it like having to adjust to this way of life?
Well, I don't know. My outlook on life is that's how it is and you just got to get on with it. I mean, I knew that. This is more of a village than it is now. You see nobody speaks to you. I mean, you knew anybody you saw, you passed. We had a shop, so if you went to the shop, you met people you knew, you see. Now, you see nobody.
People talk about the good old days. Were they? I mean, how does it compare with now?
Well, I mean, the good old days in the fact that you talked more to people that way, but financially, there's no comparison.
Tell me more about that.
Quite a lot of the men in this village worked for the Trinity lighthouses and lightships. And a lot of them worked on lightships. And they had 2 months at sea and 1 month home, if they were lucky. Then the Trinity boat used to come in. We always knew the Siren was one, I forget the other, we knew. And the men had to go out there for 2 months. And of course they had their special boxes and the shops that dealt with the shipping, you know. They had to get all this food for all that time and they'd go out, take them out to the lighthouse. And if the St. Govan's lighthouse was the main one they went to, and somebody went to the Smalls, the lightship. And if it was very rough, sometimes they couldn't get to them. They couldn't land them, so they'd bring them back home. You were out 2 months, but it was always a couple came back. Well, one of the men came back, so it wasn't the same 3 for 2 months, if you understand. And this could go on, as I say, for a week till it calmed down, and then they'd have to go out, and all this food was going over and back, and there were no fridges or freezers. And when I think about it, my father's money wasn't good and the Trinity wasn't as good as that. And they must have spent nearly all their money on food for their husbands to the lightship.
Day-to-day life is quite different now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got a car, and I mean, these children, once they're old enough to drive a car, they've got one of their own. I waited ages to get one till I could afford it.
Do you think it's better for people, and if so, in what way now?
Well, I think people are better off. The people I know are my type of people. I don't think they have such difficulty in making ends meet. That sort of thing. And of course travel is easier. Not for me. I'm worse off. Because, well, you automatically walked to places, but you had the ferry and you crossed over, and that would go all day long and every day. And now the bus goes a few times a day, but I can't get to Nayland, which I can look at. On Thursdays, I have a relative who comes now. My neighbour was very kind, but as I tell you, she's in poor health, who takes me with her to Nayland and I do my shopping. Well, before we had a shop down the bottom. The times I've started cooking and I think, oh dear, I need some sugar, and just run down the road and get it. Now you've got to make sure the house is full of stuff.
What about for women?
Well, yeah, well, life is better for women because they're all better off, and women can go, well, they do. They enjoy themselves more, don't they? They drive the car, and if they want to go somewhere, they can go. And women take more part. On the other hand, we did have more events in the village, concerts. I know it was only local, but they were happy events where you met other people, you know, etc. Now everybody, it's their own little life, isn't it? It doesn't matter about other people.
What do you think? Anything more?
Oh, well, I've been dying to know which village in Somerset you were taught at.
Ah, yes, that's right.
Kingsbury Episcopi?
Yes,
Do
I
you
grew
know
up
that?
in Curry Rival.
Oh no!
Yes,
Oh.
that's right. So you'd know the Rose and Crown, the old pub there. Eli Jenkins was his name, the man who ran that pub.
In Kingsbury?
Yeah. There was
Oh
a
yeah,
pub,
oh yeah, up the, what do you call it? No, the wife there shot her husband.
That's right, yes. Yes.
There were two pubs. The one pub that was down the road opposite the, what do you call it, that pound house. I'll show you some photos in a minute. That I've got you.
I've got a painting of that pub, actually. By,
Well, anyway, yes,
Curry
that was
Rival artist, but-
the Curry Rival. I don't remember the Curry Rival pub, but Kingsbury was, quite good. Yes, when I went for my interview, I had to go change trains at Cardiff and then at Park something. Where is it? Bristol Park something.
Parkway.
And then go down, and then change at Taunton and go out on the overline. That's gone. That line is gone down to Thorney.
Langport West.
Thorney.
That's right, Thorney.
What's called this then? And I went into the pub and had lunch, which cost me £0.50. It was very nice because I had to wait till the afternoon. And they were strangers, and she was there, and she was much. They'd come in, and she was much younger than her husband, and I used to go back. Well, I went back till my friends died, really, and I was there with my mother and father after I retired. And by that time, they'd moved out and lived in a house further down the village. And apparently she'd been too friendly with a man she shouldn't have been. And she was in a bit of a jam because there was going to be another one there. And so then that night, apparently, and it was very near where I stayed, he was in bed asleep and she shot him.
So what happened to her?
Well, I suppose she went to jail.
Yeah.